Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Let's move some more chairs around.
Yeah.
All right. As much noise as possible.
Yeah. So for those of you joining us in person, thank you for coming out tonight. For those of you joining us online, thank you for joining us through the power of the internet. This is going to be a two-part talk. There's going to be some slides, and then there'll be a hands-on portion. Anyone in the front row may get wet, so, be warned.
Nobody's up in front.
Yeah, it's pretty safe today. What is an idle game? Well, that's a hard question to answer because there's lots of different kinds of idle games, and they all fall into a broad category that we can define sort of loosely by just looking at some idle games. Up on the screen right now, I've got screenshots from a couple of ones that you might have seen on Steam. We've got Clicker Heroes here on the left and Adventure Capitalist on the right. These are both fairly common examples of an idle game that you can get if you go on Steam and look for free-to-play idle games. As you can maybe tell if you've played idle games, this is from like many hours of playing this game. And as we'll learn, playing is very much so in air quotes. Because the whole idea of an idle game is that you don't really spend that much time playing it, and you spend a lot of time not playing it. So we can characterize idle games by a few major concepts that they contain. Again, as I stated, they're based around the notion that the time away from the game is almost as important as time in the game itself. Most of them fall into that category. Specifically, these two have a mechanic where if you are not playing the game, it actually still keeps track of your accumulating points, whatever they may be. In the case of Adventure Capitalist, it's dollars. In the case of Clicker Heroes, it's coins. So like if you stop playing and then come back 2 days later, it's pop-ups the thing that calculated the amount of money you would have made if you had left it on that whole time. So this is a major theme of idle games. Another type of game which I am going to be talking about and using them interchangeably in this talk is called a clicker game. Same idea. Most of them follow the same sort of general notions of they take very little of your actual effort to get involved in, and then they want to be left alone for a while, basically. So if we look at both of these screens, they're sort of there's a crazy amount of information going on both of these screenshots. And if you haven't played these games, you're looking at this and you're like, what the heck is going on here? And that's actually a very interesting feature of most idle games, which is that towards the when you've gotten to a certain point in the game, there's a lot of information that you have to know for the game. Both of these games, Adventure Capitalist and Clicker Heroes, only have one real major, what you could call currency or point system. Clicker Heroes has this coin again, and Adventure Capitalist has the dollars. But they also have supplementary systems that interact with that. So Adventure Capitalist has like a bunch of monetization concepts, which I'm not going to get too much into here, and that's what all these other numbers are. But it also has something called a prestige system, which is like when you reset, all the numbers can get even higher, and all sorts of similar things like that. And again, if you've never seen a clicker game before or an idle game before, then this is all going to be like way too much information on any screen at once. But when you first start these games, there's a lot less information. So I'm going to flip through some slides now, and they're going to be some other idle games that are pretty typical representations of things. Again, these are mostly web games that we're going to be talking about. These are ones that are in the browser. These two are kind of the exception. I wanted to bring them up because they are the ones that most people have seen because they have a lot of exposure. But there are there's tons of them out there. So another big popular one on the internet is Cookie Clicker. This is one of the biggest browser-based ones that people might know. Again, this is from significantly along in the game, so there's like a ton of stuff, and the numbers are really high, and that's something we'll talk about a little bit later is how that works. Cookie Clicker is a fine example of a game that follows the central tenets of an idle game, even though it could also be called a clicker game. There's not really any distinction between those two. This is a game called A Dark Room, which it's a little bit hard to tell because it's dark, but we've got this one is distinct from the earlier ones that we talked about in that it has a variety of different currencies or point systems, and they all play into each other. At the end of the day, these are just different mechanisms for adding complexity, but they all sort of come together if you were to draw sort of a graph of dependencies of what you needed to get, what thing, they would all look very similar. They're all very, branching path types of things with, straight lines from the very beginning that branch out very quickly. Cookie Clicker only has one currency, it's cookies, but, that turns into a bunch of different things because there's all sorts of systems that interacts with. A Dark Room has a whole bunch of different currencies, and I don't know if anyone can read those, but there's like, there's like wood and metal and all sorts of things. This is from, a little ways into the game, so there's still a bunch that haven't even showed up yet. But, it all comes down to a dependency graph of how to get things. This is a game called Kittens Game, which has a notoriety for having a ridiculous number of currency systems that all interplay. If you look on the left side here, there's at least a dozen, and then there's like, a whole 24 more down here that you can't even see because you'd have to scroll down. And then in the middle is like, the resource constructor things, and there's like tons and tons of those, and there's like tabs, and it's a very dense idle game. And then, one that most people are probably familiar with because it was very popular a year or two ago now was something called Universal Paperclips. And this is one that I'm going to focus on now for a little bit because it's a little bit more accessible in terms of describing the concepts. And these concepts tend to apply to most idle games. So if you look at this screenshot, this is actually pretty early in the game. So unlike a lot of the other pictures where I've been showing stuff fairly, like after many hours of sitting at these things, this is after maybe 20 minutes tops. It's not very far into the game. So we can see something here, which is this screen is mostly empty. Like, Universal Paperclips is pretty bare bones in terms of how they're presenting their game, but it still displays all of the concepts of your average idle game. So we've got some very simple buttons here, and there's there's a currency here, and there's like a buttons here that you can adjust the cost of your paper clips, and then on the bottom you have like tools which can automate the process, because when you first start this game you've only got this one button here, and I don't have a screenshot of that, but it's essentially it just has this make paperclips button. So like you click that at first, and then after a while you unlock this button here, which lets you make a thing that makes paperclips for you. And that's what, that's how most of these games work. Cookie Clicker, exactly the same thing. First you got to click the cookie, then it unlocks the pointer, which will click the cookie for you. And then over time, more of these systems open up. So at this point in the game, there's this right column of stuff that had just come up, and that's got like these enhancements here, which are like basically increase the rate of change of these systems here. And that's a fairly common thing in idle games. You'll see a system that augments a prior system, and then later on that will unlock a new system that interacts with the former system and builds on it. And this leads to something which is the most common thing in idle games. It's called exponential growth. Idle games are basically an exercise in creating exponential growth while trying to engage the player. So the two main things you see in idle games is this exponential growth concept and stringing along players with the promise of novelty, is what I will call it. It's the idea that when you do something new might happen. So in Universal Paperclips, when I make a certain number of paperclips, I unlock the auto clicker, which will make paperclips without me having to do anything. And then when I get a certain number of auto clickers, that'll unlock this thing here, which makes the auto clickers better, so they make even more paper clips per second. And then I want to know what the next thing that's going to come out is. So idle games follow this pattern throughout. Universal paperclips is really interesting because it actually sort of has this, and this is going to be spoilers for an idle game, so I hope you don't mind spoilers for idle games, but Universal paperclips has an interesting thing where it sort of pivots twice throughout the game. After a while here, the entire game will basically go into a whole new setting, and the entire gameplay changes. It's still exactly an idle game, but the entire systems that you're interacting with are slightly different. So I'll page over here, and this is slightly, this is after that transition has happened. So you can see here we had 149,000 paperclips. Now we have 746 billion paperclips. So this is later on in the game, and all of those systems are slightly different now. So we've gotten rid of this manufacturing system and the business stuff, but some of the buttons are familiar, and some of the words are the same. But there's all new systems. So like it's pivoted to a different style of game. It's pivoted the way that you interact with the game. It's still the same idle game systems, they're just slightly different ones. So it's almost like a completely different idle game with the same sort of theme. And then after another period of time has elapsed, Universal paperclips transitions once more into a third form, which looks something like this. Again, it's very similar in terms of the concepts that they're expressing, but they've got different accessories. So it's that pushing the novelty on you. So it's saying, what's going to happen next? I got to keep engaging with this at some point in time. And as at this point, it's like the number is absurd. Like they are actually highlighting that by giving you extra zeros. They don't actually keep track of these, but I feel like it's a billion, trillion, quadrillion. It's like 6 to the 9 or 6 to the 10, some ridiculous number here. And you can see down here they actually go through trouble of writing the words for it. So apparently have 1 octillion unused paperclips at this point in the game. So it's that notion of exponential growth is one of the biggest things in idle games. If we go back and look at some of the numbers on the earlier ones, Cookie Clicker has 484.276 quinvigintillion cookies. These are just numbers. I'm pretty sure they're just making up the extensions at that point because nobody's ever really reasoned about numbers that big. And then Clicker Heroes doesn't even bother, they just give you the exponent. So this is 7.5 times 10 to the 33 coins, which is an absurd number. And the venture capitalist, same thing, 5.9 duo-octogentillion. I got through that just fine, thank you. So like these are numbers that are pretty typical because idle games are all about that exponential growth. A dark room actually is very interesting in this regard because it sort of doesn't fall into that trap. You end up with a number of resources, but they're all very manageable, and they don't. What is going on here? Why did I just do that? But they don't get ridiculous, and the game has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Cookie Clicker, Clicker Heroes, Adventure Capitalist, Kittens game. They don't have ends, but there are uses for these in narrative contexts. Again, Universal paperclips is a game with a story. It's got a beginning, a middle, and end. This is the beginning, this is the middle, and this is the end. After you get to a certain point, the game actually has an ending. You can stop it and not play it anymore, which is unusual for an idle game. So, having talked about sort of the general exponential growth and novelty thing, one of the other things we want to talk about is how do we construct something like that? Like if I want to make an idle game and I want to be like the next Cookie Clicker and have 1 million people going on my website every day, well, what do I have to do? Well, some of the things that we can look at is the idea of the systems changing over time. That's what keeps people playing these games. Kittens game, has 60 billion things going on it because somebody realized that if you continually have new systems for people to engage with, they will keep engaging with it. If there's a goal to achieve, no matter how trivial, in this case, there's absolutely no graphics in this game. It's buttons on a page. There's numbers and buttons, that's it. This one doesn't have any graphics. That's still sufficient to get people interested because, again, novelty. Like there's flavor text on some of these things, like like if you got like a collectible card game card that has like a little text on it. That's what these all have tooltips that have like little text for what they are. So that's what you're getting. That's the reward you get for clicking all the buttons. Is you get new buttons that have new text on them. That's it. It doesn't have to be much. Universal paperclips, again, no graphics, but it's got a layout to it. It's got a little bit of stuff going on, and by the end there, it's got some interesting things happening, and it definitely breaks things up. But again, it's a means to an end in this case. Like they're pushing a story, there's a narrative, there's sort of, the idea that this is some sort of business software. So it's got like, it's got this thing that looks kind of like a spreadsheet going on, and that follows through the whole game. And then it's got, like all the buttons just look like stuff in like accounting software. So it's like, they know what they're doing. It's putting together all of these concepts into a theme that's a cohesive whole. And that's something that you can do with an idle game that's not predatory. Don't make a venture capitalist. This is nothing. This is not a game. This is a bunch of buttons and an enticement for you to pay them money so the button numbers go up faster. That's not a really okay thing in my book. Really, to ignore the fact that I have ridiculous numbers in this game. Let's just talk about the fact that that's not an effective means to producing gameplay. Again, clicker heroes, same idea. There's actual graphics and stuff, but it's still like, it's an idle game. You don't actually interact with this game in any way. The game plays itself. And that's, the big theme. Cookie clicker, it has 9,000 different systems now, but it's still, at the end of the day, the majority of the time it's not doing anything. So what can we take away from these examples of idle games that we can use today to make ourselves an idle game that's going to win the hearts and minds of millions? Start with small, simple systems. You want something that's accessible. You want like one button, maybe something obvious that somebody can see and click on and engage with. You want it to be something that has some sort of interest to it. So it's like, what sort of theme or some sort of idea that will get people to engage with it in the first place. And you want people to sort of pick it up and like very quickly discover the next thing. It's, it's the dopamine hit. It's the, I did something happened, and now I have a new goal to get to. If it's just clicking the same button forever, then nobody will engage with it, forever. I say nobody, but there are people out there who have played games that are just one button that doesn't do anything. So I can't really vouch for everyone on that account. Another thing you want to look at is, theme. You want a theme, because it's just putting buttons on a place doesn't really get you anywhere. And you want, most of these systems always show the number, because that's their thing. Again, a dark room is a little bit different because, it's not about the numbers. There's more of a game idea here, but it's still, you've always got your systems in place, and you know what you're trying to do next. So you give the player a goal that they can work towards. It's just like almost any other game, except the secret is there's not much gameplay. You want, if you're engaging in the archetypical idle game gameplay, there's clicking buttons for, 5 minutes maybe at the beginning, enough to get them started. And then from there, you've given them access to at least one or two systems that they can branch out into to sort of let the game start doing things on its own. And then maybe beyond that, you've given them, a bunch of other opportunities for growth. What's up?
Are all of these games running the same content engine?
All of these games that we're talking about today are developed in completely different ways. I can say this with 100% fact because I've looked at the way they all work to break them so that I could not have to sit for 12 hours and play paper clips so that I could have slides for this presentation. So actually, that's an interesting question. What sort of technologies are these using? Well, all of the web ones are put together completely differently, depending on the creator. This cookie clicker is made by a person called Artil. It's a French developer, and this is sort of one of the first projects he ever did. So it's really sort of weird JavaScript and all sorts of crazy stuff. A dark room is it's really nice. It's all well put together, but again, it's all pretty basic JavaScript. Kittens game, no comment. Universal Paperclips, another good example of a game that's put together well with a couple of libraries, bit of jQuery here and there, but it's pretty simple. So let's talk about how I would make an idle game, because I didn't make any of those, and I'm not a famous idle game developer, but like having talked about idle games, you know, what technologies would I use to make an idle game? Well, the secret to that is I would use whatever technologies I use for everything else, because that's, you know, what I know. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is the technologies that I know and how we can use those to build an idle game.
Angular is not one of those clients.
We'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. So what we're going to be doing is building a simple server-client application. We don't really actually need the server for anything, so we're not going to really talk too much about it. It's just serving our client, which is the idle game itself, and we're going to build everything on the client side. So there's no real server interaction here, but this is just for having some starting point so that you can test it on your machine. So just for, again, this isn't super important. You can use anything for the server, but for this particular thing that we're going to be talking about, the server is thrown together with Node, which is JavaScript for the server, basically. Express, which is a thing that will let you get files from Node on the web, and Webpack is the tool that we're going to be using to build our client. It's called transpiling. It makes it so that the code that we write works on almost any browser. And then the technologies we're going to be using on the client are almost entirely modern JavaScript. Sometimes you might see it as ECMAScript 2015. That's what technically the standard is called, but most people just call it JavaScript because it's just a new JavaScript standard. And React. Sometimes you see it as React.js. React is a compositioning tool developed originally out of Facebook, but it's one of the biggest, most popular web tools today for making front-end applications. These types of things are called, that we're going to be making, they're called single-page applications or single-page web applications, depending. They're called that because they are on one page. You don't ever use the forward or back button in your browser, and they're entirely feature-rich, content-rich applications. If you look at paperclips, if you look at the URL bar, it's always the same URL bar in all these different looking pages because it's all deployed as a single-page web application. And I've got jQuery here. We're not going to be using any jQuery today, but jQuery is one of those helper tools that makes your life easier, gives you the shortcuts when you need them. But we're not going to be getting into anything too advanced. So those are the basic technologies. So we're going to get into some real coding now. If you want to follow along, you can pull the Git repository straight from GitHub. This QR code will go to this URL, or you can just go to this URL. Up to you. You don't have to do either of those things, but that's how you could if you wanted to. This is my personal GitHub account. I've got a boilerplate template up there. If you're not super into following along, I will be committing a special branch to that repo for this project, so you can just pull what we go through this evening. All right, I'm going to swap over to some text editing tools, and we'll get started. Let's see. All right, I don't need that. All right, so when you, this is Visual Studio Code that I'm using here. You can use whatever text editor of your choice, but the folder that we just pulled from Git is going to look a little bit like this. It's got two folders in here, server and client, and it's also going to have a public folder, which is where our output from our changes to the client is going to go. As far as the server is concerned, we don't really have to worry about that. That's what's up here right now. It's very straightforward. We open a port and we, serve the public directory over it. It's, like I said, we're not super concerned about the server in this demonstration. It's just there so that we can serve our files and look at them on the web. The important thing we're going to want to do is look in client, and we're going to open up index.jsx. Now, JSX is the first weird thing you're going to encounter. If you've ever done anything with normal JavaScript or Node, you've seen .js, but what's JSX? JSX is a special format that's out of React, And basically what they did was they said, you know what's really annoying? Having to escape all of my angle brackets for HTML in my JavaScript files. So JSX is a file format that says, I'm going to use some special syntax that means don't escape my HTML. And that special syntax is really simple. Anytime we're in a JavaScript context, which is this global context we're looking at right now, that's what we're normally in. If we put an open close parentheses, we can just put HTML in it. So this is just an HTML tag right here, and that's fine because it's inside parentheses. The opposite is also true. If I wanted to put JavaScript in an HTML context, I can use curly braces to do that. We're not going to use that in this page, but we'll use it in the we'll use it throughout for all sorts of fun things.
Quick request: is it possible to zoom in a little bit so that the text will be a little larger on the screen?
Theoretically, yes. Practically, let's see if that works. Zoom in. Okay, is that better?
One more time, please.
How's that? Can we read that now?
That looks a lot better, thank you.
Okay, cool. So again, we've got, this is our index.jsx in the client directory of that folder that we just pulled down. It's really straightforward. We've just got this React DOM.render function, and it's got this weird thing that looks like HTML, but has a HTML tag that no one's ever heard of before. And then it's just got, this is something that we could do with jQuery, but I'm doing it with basic JavaScript, which is just getting an element from the document. There's a included HTML document that we're going to be serving that just has this special div, which has that ID equals app. So we're never going to mess with that again. And that's why this is a single page application. There's one page, index.html, that we're going to be manipulating for our application. So what is this main app? Well, this is a React, what's called component. This is a React component. And React components are the most powerful tool imagined by Facebook. They let you create custom HTML elements that can respond to the different changes in the what you would call, in the application context. So we've got this one here, which is just called main app, and this is going to be the root of our idle game. So I'm going to tab over to main app.jsx, which is where this is defined, and we can get started. So in here, I've got this very basic boilerplate. This first line here is the, magic class definition. If you've ever worked with, object-oriented programming before, this is pretty straightforward. If you ignore these first two words, you can see that it just says class main app extends react.component. That looks sure like a lot of object-oriented programming you might have seen before. React component is the base class for the React components, and main app is the one that we're creating now that extends it. This export default is some JavaScript stuff that's going to let us just use that magical import over here in index.jsx. So if we import main app, that just makes sure it gets to the right place. We don't need to worry too much about that because we're not going to be messing with anything in that context for now. And as we can see, there's a constructor here, and we're just calling this super function, which is calling react.components constructor with props. And then there's this .state, which is getting set to an empty object, and that's all, folks. In render, there's this render function here, and all that's doing is returning what looks like some HTML. And again, it's in parentheses because it's a JSX file. That means we can do things like put angle brackets there. So now that we've got something that should run, because we pulled it from the web, we're going to pull open a command line, and this is going to be probably harder to see. Oh no, you can see it better on that screen than on my screen.
Is this a terminal or?
This is just a command prompt. So I just have a command prompt in that folder where I just clone that to, and I'm going to run npm run start. before I do that, I'm going to do npm install because, you know, we just downloaded this package. And this is just going to make sure that we get all of the things that we need. Okay, mine's up to date already. And then I'm going to do npm start. And that's going to just start the server. We're never going to have to touch the server again. Once it's running, and we can just leave it alone the whole rest of the night. I'm going to open up another command prompt. And I'm going to go to the same place. I'm going to do npm run pack. And this is going to do something, this is going to do that transpile step, and it's going to take our client, it's going to put it all together into a single JavaScript file called main.js, and that's going to shove it in the public directory. So we'll see it here, and then it's going to let us visit that, you know, from our server, which is serving everything in the public directory. So if I go to localhost 8080, it'll be served. And we can see here, all we've got is this extremely tiny test text. Look at that, it just says test. Now, if we look at our application, well, our main app is only is a div which contains the word test. So that to me looks correct.
Oh, there's a request on Twitch. It says, did he cover downloading or installing Node.js?
Download and or install Node.js at your convenience. I'm not going to cover that today.
If you go to their,
yeah, you can go to nodejs.org and just get it from there. Yeah, it's outside the scope of what I'm talking about. So just to verify that I'm building the right thing, I'm going to change my text, and I'm going to run pack again and get yelled at. All right, why did I get yelled at?
To answer Taco Bill's question, wouldn't that be necessary? The answer is yes.
yeah.
Oh no, I accidentally got rid of my slash.
Just plug and play system and like the address adder, I think like facilitates like worms just like eating like everything's graphics card.
Alright, so cool beans. So that all works. So now we're in the right place. So let's start talking about what we need for an idle game. Again, we want some basic things in an idle game. We want buttons. Everyone likes buttons, right? So let's make a button that we're going to click on. And we need a theme for our idle game, right? Well, this is the TVGS stream, and I kind of wish that TVGS had more success with our stream. So I'm going to make an idle game that lets me like get followers on Twitch, because that's what the kids are into these days, being streamers. So we want to appeal to the kids. So we're going to do export class button, and we're just going to extend the React component. And this is going to, you know, we're going to make a button now so that later when we want 17 different buttons for all the different things you have to do in your idle game, we can just, you know, use a button that we already made instead of having to make a new one every time.
I understand that components are usually associated with graphics cards. Do you have a specific engine that you're running, or is it just React? Like,
This is just React, man. So we're going to do the same thing where we give it constructor props and super props. Now, React components have two special features. They have properties and they have state. State is what changes and makes the component get rendered, and props are what are passed in as attributes, is what you would call them in standard HTML. So if I had like HTML, something like that, ID equals 1, 2, 3, that's an attribute. In React, that's called a property. And that will get passed in that props object that comes to our constructor. So if I want to make a button here, I can just draw a button here. And then I can, you know, give it a property like, I can give it whatever properties I want. Give it a property Sam equals awesome, because that is accurate in every possible way. And now if I wanted to say if props.sam equals some, you know, I don't want to return from the constructor, but you know, you could do stuff like that. And that's what we're going to use for our different button text. So we can say button text equals. Let's make a first button here. It's going to be stream on Twitch, because we want to make the TVGS streaming idle game. So we'll take all that in, and then we'll make a render function. So properties carry throughout the object. So if I wanted to make our button here, I just need my render to return a div with, button text, let's call it, just to be clear what it is, because text actually means a different thing sometimes.
What do you call render from component as well?
So we don't have to call render because that's magical React stuff. Render gets called whenever we make a button. So when we make this button here in the main app, then it will get rendered, because we just told it to get drawn in this render function. And this is the, main app's render function, which is called by this, React DOM.render in the root. So all of that's going to get propagated through. So we've got that. So now we should have a div with text, but it's not really a button if it doesn't have a click, right? So we need a special behavior called onClick. So we need to make a function for what happens when it gets clicked. So we can just make an onClick function for this button. OnClick is usually what we call that because it's a special function that has to be called onClick. And that's an event, but we don't care about that right now. But when the button's clicked, we can just do a simple thing like change the text to, streaming. We're streaming now. We can't actually change props like that though, because props are immutable. So we have to change the state. So we're gonna talk about state now. The components have something called state, which is what causes, when you change the state, that causes the render loop to happen again. So that's where we get this super useful, like, magical React component stuff from, because I don't have to ever call render, I just have to change the state of an object and it'll, automatically go through all the trouble of re-rendering it. So if I wanted to make a display that just showed how many points I had, if I change the points, the display will get updated automatically. So what we're going to do is update that so button text loads into some state, which is the the value of the button. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to go back up here and we're going to update the main app state, because again, this is an idle game. We need some sort of point systems, and we're making an idle game about streaming TVGS, so streamers have followers, right? So we're going to make sure that TVGS starts out with 0 followers. It's not very nice, but it's accurate. When we started out, we had 0 followers. So yeah, so this is our main app, and main app state has 0 followers. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna maybe want to show that here. So we're gonna say followers, and we're gonna put that in brackets, this dot state dot followers, and that will get us, this will parse it as JavaScript and come back out as a proper, HTML string. So that'll give us the followers, and then we'll have a button next to it that says stream on Twitch. And let's see what we can do here. We don't want to actually change the text to say streaming, but we want to make sure that on click we add a follower, right? Because when you stream, you get more followers. If you stream all the time, you get lots of followers. That's how people like Ninja have millions of followers. Okay, so
for the dictionary, is that a function or just a setting? Oh yeah, you define it up there. I don't remember.
Yeah. So on click, we're going to make sure that we increment followers. But wait a minute, we're in the button right now. Button doesn't know anything about followers. So where do we get followers from? Well, there's like many ways to handle this, but the most common way to do this is to pass a callback function, is what it's called, to the button. So we can say it, click callback is equal to something. We haven't defined the function yet, so we're going to define, followers click, add follower. We can add a follower, right? So add follower just has to do followers, plus equals 1. Followers equals followers plus equal 1. But that's not how it works, unfortunately. If we want to change state in React, we need to use a special function called setState. If we try and change the state directly, then we might have problems, because state could be getting changed by a bunch of different things, and I could have more than one thing in here. Like, maybe later we'll have like 20 different kinds of properties. Like, we've got followers, and we've got, cash money. We've got like, YouTubers, or collabs. Let's do collabs. That's what streamers do, right? They have collabs. So like, later on we might have those things. So if we just change this dot state like to something else, followers plus 1, then we will break all of that. So we have a special function called this.setState, which lets us do a special change to the state, where we can say followers is equal to this.state.followers plus 1, and that'll increment our follower count. And so now we've got add follower, and the word follower is getting really weird in my head, so bear with me here. So right now we've got our div is going to render the follower count, and then we've got our button, which has a special click callback, which we're going to set to add follower. And then we're going to go and change this thing so that on click we call this.props.click callback. That. And now, when you click on the button, we will propagate through to this add follower function, which will increment the followers. And then that will cause a re-render because state just changed. It's called mutating. State mutates is what the React documentation refers to that as. And then we will get another follower. Okay, so that is like the most basic level of an idle game. We've got a button, you click, and it increments a number. Uh-oh, when you click the button, it doesn't increment that. Oh, I'm sorry, I put the on-click in the wrong place. Okay, yeah, it helps when you put the on-click function. I'm gonna call myClick just to be clarified. And one other magical thing we have to do, which is a class boilerplate, we have to say myClick equals we have to do this magic thing called binding the this, which makes sure that the this in this function, this, oh boy, this here matches the object that we're currently in, the button, instead of something else. This is some magical modern JavaScript juju, which fixes old JavaScript madness that somebody made up in 1997.
Yeah, and functions are defined or anything like that, right? Variables or dictionaries. There's no like integer specified.
Well, so far we haven't even really defined any variables. We made some properties which were just defaulted to ints. So let's try that again. We've got, did I build it? Did it build? It did build. Okay. Let's see where we went wrong here. What did I do? myClick is not defined. Oh, I know. Yeah, we gotta say this on myClick. All right, now let's try that again. Take 3. We should have a little counter that we could keep track of how many times Sam compiles the code and it doesn't work. Okay.
We did it.
We did it. Oh, but it's not streaming. Why are we not streaming? Taro, why are we not getting any followers when we stream? These are real problems. Cannot read followers of undefined. Add object, add. Okay, we are calling add follower.
Oh, HTML5, right? You never started this script for HTML5.
What did I do wrong? This dot state dot followers. Did I spell followers wrong somewhere? Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't bind this on add follower. See, you gotta bind. Always bind your thises. If I teach you one thing tonight, I would say always bind your thises. And we're gonna add a special property dash watch to that pack so that we don't ever have to come back to this window again because it'll just it's watching you. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, now when we click stream on Twitch, we get a follower, and that's how that works. That's exactly real life, 100%. Every time you stream, you get one follower. So like in an idle game, that's the first level, right? You got to click the button until you get some point, and then something will unlock. And then when that thing unlocks, then you get something new. So let's talk about what the next thing is. Well, maybe the next thing we have is cash money, because like you've been streaming for a long time and you start getting you get into YouTube's partner program or whatever the Twitch thing is that I don't know what it's called.
My parents has been talking about.
So we can talk about
Yes,
what
the prop is invisible. The button never actually shows up.
Oh, this entire text box just has a magical on-click property associated with it. So anywhere we click on here, and we can use CSS to make it actually a box, but I'm not super going to do that right now because only so much time.
I gotta head out.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're gonna add our next state of this game. So we want to add our second button here. What's the next button? We want to add a thing that lets us get cash money or something. Or maybe we want to spend cash money on stuff. So, I mean, TVGS when we started out, we had maybe some cash money and we didn't have any followers. So maybe we could spend money on an upgrade to get more followers. We could buy a better set, and then people will come to our thing. So we want to have a money property, right? And we're gonna take an amount, and we're gonna say this dot set state cash money is equal to this dot state dot cash money plus amount, and then we can make sure that we have enough money if this dot state dot cash money is greater than AMT. We want greater than or equal to. We do want greater than or equal to. Greater than or equal looks like a frowny face. If it's greater than or equal to amount, we want to set the state. If it's less than amount, then we want to return false because we didn't change it, and we'll return true here. So now we have a function which we can take away. Well, we can add cash money, and we can make a matching function to take away cash money. Because you want to get money, but you also you got to spend money to make money, right? Sub money, same function basically. What did I just do? No, we don't care. We're adding money. We're always gonna get value. We're always gonna get real money.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, why did you do that?
I was thinking of subtracting money. I'm always thinking about losing money here. TVGS is all about the losing money. If cash money is less than amount, then we can't do that. Otherwise, we can do that. We can return true, and we can do this, but with a minus. Okay, and this will be positive numbers because why not? And then we can do binding on that. Okay, so now we've got two magic functions here. And so maybe we want to add some new buttons, right? We want to make like a special button that's our, you know, it's a one-time button, right? It's like our special button that we can buy our new stuff, but we can only buy it once. Like once you have it, like getting it again isn't going to do anything, right? It's called an upgrade. It's a common idle game thing. So we're going to make a new type of button called the upgrade button, which can only be pressed once. And it's going to extend button because, you know, we can do that in JavaScript. We're going to use our magical code, constructor props, super props. And this is state, and then render. These are the things that we need in every single function, so remember those and you'll be set for life. Then we can start talking about our upgrade button. Our upgrade button is gonna, you know, it's gonna draw a regular button, right? But we also want to make sure that if it's already, you know, pressed, then we can't press it again. This state is equal to pressed equals false, right? We want to check the default behavior. Pressed equals false, and we want to add a, you know, so we want to add a on click. We want to make sure that set state, we want to set it to pressed equals true. And if that happens, then we want to make sure that you know, we set the right situation. So, you know, if pressed, then we want to do one thing, else we want to, you know, render our normal button. Okay, so that's how we would get like one of our special we can add unlocked and then, you know, text, and then we could have you know, button text. We call it button text, right? Okay, cool. And we want to return those things. And then return. And finally, we want to add the on-click behavior only to the case where it hasn't been clicked. And we'll add the callback behavior here to this dot props dot click cd. And there we go. We probably also want to add one more thing, because like, what if I click this button and I don't have enough money? So maybe we got to check if the callback is true. So, you know. So if callback returns true, then we set state pressed and you can't press it again. If it returns false, you didn't do the thing, so it didn't work. So you didn't unlock the thing. So there we go. There's our new magic button, and we can start putting that in here. I'm going to spread this out a little bit just so that it's easier to see what's going on here. I think this is a little bit clearer what's going on. These are the properties of that button, and there's the slash for it. There. So now maybe it fits all on one page. Okay. And then we'll add our new button, which will be a upgrade button. We called it upgrade button. What did I lose here? Oh, I lost my tag. Yeah, there we go. We'll call it an upgrade button, and we'll give it button text by green screen. Green screen's a thing you only ever have to buy once, right? And click cd equals this dot sub money. But we've got to do a little bit of magic here. We got to make it a function. We want to call this dot sub money, and we want it to cost like $10. I don't know how much green screens cost. I've never had to buy one. And there we go. So let's pull this off into its own line just so it's clear to see what we've got going on here. Okay, so we've got a button which says stream on Twitch, which adds a follower, and we've got an upgrade button which is buy green screen. We should probably tell how much it costs. And you know, we could just generalize this to say, well, every single upgrade button is going to have a cost associated with it, right? So we can make that just part of this upgrade button, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. That's a project you can do in your own time. So let's see what we've got. We've got nothing. What did I do wrong that time? Uh-oh, super expression must either be null or a function, not undefined. That's a new one. Super. What did I do wrong? Constructor props, super props. Try that, see if that fixes it. Nope. Did it build? Did it build? Alright, let's see what we got now. Nope, not that. Oh, pressed is not defined. How is pressed not defined? I totally put right there. Alright, well, this dot my click. And we probably want button text to be this dot props dot button text. You know, just because we're trying to. Coding is super fast. It's definitely the best way to code. Alright, cool. So now, why is that not showing up? What did it do? Where'd it go? Where's our new button? Let's see. I don't know. Did we not draw it? No. If this dot state dot pressed. This dot state dot pressed is false. Okay, let's see. Upgrade button. We made an upgrade button. Okay. Let's hide this button for now. Are we drawing that text? Yeah, we are. This dot props dot button text. Oh, I see. Okay, I can. If I don't put the right property, it doesn't load. There we go. Okay. Typing is hard. Okay, there we go. So now we've got our green screen. We have $10, so should be able to buy it. We did not. What happened? What's wrong? Why can't we buy our green screen? Oh no. Stop my click. Okay, this is our props dot click callback. What is click callback? We have click callback. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, well, that's my bad. We didn't return that. There we go. Okay, there we go. So now we bought a green screen. But that doesn't do anything right now, right? But having a green screen means our production values went up, right? So we should get more streamers when that happens, right?
Yeah, we should.
Or we should get more followers, I guess. I'm forgetting how streaming works. So we've got followers right now, we've got 0, and then we've got add followers. So we're gonna add the same amount property to add follower that we have to the other things. And we're gonna default it to 1. And then we're going to say, we're going to add a property here called follower inc which will be the incremental value that we increase followers by every time we increase followers. And then we'll call add followers. We don't even need amount. We can just say followers is plus this dot state dot followers inc. And then we can make sure that when we do this function, we can upgrade this. So we'll make a new function here, by green screen, and we'll just call sub_money10, and if we subtracted the money, we return true, and we increment the follower incrementing tool, and then we will also add if return false for all their cases, because we couldn't do that. So we're going to say follow this dot state set state followers inc this dot state dot followers inc. Oh god, plus 1, and then we've got everything that we need there for by green screen to do what it's supposed to do. And then we'll change click callback here from a lambda function, which is what this is. Surprise, you're learning lambda calculus, to by green screen. There we go, and one more time. Let's all say it together now. Bind your thises. Stop by green screen, stop by green screen, dot bind this. And for those of you playing along at home, yes, you can write a function that does this binding for all the subfunctions in this function using introspection. I'm not doing that because it's a pain in the neck. So there we go. There's our now magic functions. That should do all the right things. Let's see where I messed up. Okay, so now we get 1, 2, 3. Buy the green screen for $10. 5, 7, 9. Wow, look at that. That's great. Okay, so now I have a green screen, so I get 2 followers for every stream.
Wow.
And I can't buy it anymore, so it doesn't work after that.
Yikes.
So that's great. That's exactly what we want.
But we could buy another green screen on top of that green screen.
I mean, I don't think having 2 green screens helps, unfortunately. But what we can do is I can, TVGS is an organization, right? Like, I can hire somebody to do this for me, right? So, I'm going to make an upgrade button for, somebody, we want someone to be, full-time on this, right? Hire full-time staff. So they can be, streaming all day, right? We're going to make a new click callback for this, equals this dot by staff. And we'll close the category here, and we'll make our new function for hiring full-time staff, right? So we want hire staff. This is going to be where we get to real true meat of the idle game, and this is the last thing we're going to talk about. Hire staff is going to bring someone on who's going to be running the stream all the time, and by all the time I mean once a day maybe. So it's not going to be all the time. So we're going to use the power of JavaScript here to give us some magic. So staff apparently we're hiring very cheap staff. They're still $10. I don't know, they're not giving us that many followers, so that's fine. I'm okay with this. So we're going to hire some staff, and what they're going to do is we're going to start this new set timeout thing, which is a magic function that will call another function after a certain number of time. So after a certain number of milliseconds, we can call another function here. And so this is where we're gonna do a special new function. So we're gonna call. We want this to be self-triggering. So we want it to call itself every time. So we can't put it here because otherwise it would charge $10 every time. So we need to make our new function called staff loop. Let's call it just for simplicity's sake. And then I'm gonna call set timeout. Staff loop, and I'm going to just call it I'm gonna call it every 1/10 of a second. And then this is our magical function where work's gonna happen. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna, add follower. And then we're gonna call set timeout. So once we get staff, this loop is gonna be called, and from now on, we can just sit back and let the followers roll in. And that's where idle games really get going. So let's see what happens when we do this staff loop now. So when we hire staff, if we have $10, the staff will start working, and you know what? They're never going to ask for money ever again. That's exactly how it works in real life. Nobody ever asks you for money after the first time. So let's try this. Boop, boop. Okay. So stream on Twitch. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, and hire some staff. Oh no. Why didn't I not hire staff?
Why did you not?
Oh, I say it with me now. I gotta bind them misses.
Yes, you do.
Stop by staff. This stop by staff. Bind this. This staff loop. We go this. Staff loop. Bind this. Okay, there we go. Now let's try that again. Okay. Uh-oh. Now it's really broken. What did I do this time? I spelled bind wrong. Where did I spell bind wrong? Not read property bind, undefined. Oh, maybe I spelled. It's not called buy staff? Hire staff, I see. I'm gonna change it to buy staff, because we buy a green screen, we buy staff. Yeah, that's what we called it there. So I just called it wrong. Okay, cool. There we go. Okay, cool. So now, look, we get 1, 2. We're gonna hire some staff. Now look, oh my god, look at this. This is amazing. I'm gonna get the green screen and it's gonna go up even faster. And there you go. And that's idle games.
We did it.
We can, we can make sure that these only show up after you have a certain number of followers. So like we can, check that we can, make sure that these upgrade buttons only appear like if you have followers are greater than 100. So like, we hook people. I know. I appreciate it because half the time I don't notice, but in this case, it's like we can do things like that where we only show the upgrade buttons after a certain amount of time, so you can get people to just start streaming by themselves before they even think about buying a green screen and or hiring staff. And you can talk about people maybe doing other things like making more upgrade buttons. And again, like I said, we can generalize some of these things, like the amount of money that they cost could be standardized. So we can move that into a cost field, something like that. And then we don't need this $.